watching Katie Kirby. So I started Eric by Terry Pratchett this morning, and it's actually the first Terry Pratchett novel I've read. I've read his short stories, A Stroke of the Pen, and I really loved them. He's so funny, and I especially love his footnotes. I love how he observes and picks up on and then satirizes these things that we kind of just take for granted. Like, it just makes you think about how ridiculous some certain things are.
Gods and demons, being creatures outside of time, don't move in it like bubbles in a stream. Everything happens at the same time for them. This should mean that they know everything that is going to happen because, in a sense, it already has. The reason they don't is that reality is a big place with a lot of interesting things going on, and keeping track of all of them is like trying to use a very big video recorder with no freeze button or tape counter. It's usually just easier to wait and see.
It's just so funny. I love this bit too. Eric seemed marginally more likeable, which wasn't acceptable.
It was a very warm evening, so later on at about 7, I went outside to read some more of this book, and I ended up finishing this outside. Also, there was a deer.
Perhaps it's time to call it a day, he thought. Death turned to go, but just as he did, he heard the faintest of noises. It was to sound what one photon is to light, so weak and feeble that it would have passed entirely unheard in the din of an operating universe. Oh, this is so good. As I say, I'm very, very pleased to be reading my first Terry Pratchett novel.
I also have to say, this book smells so good. So now we are going on to Tuesday, and I had started A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce the night before. James Joyce is one of the most famous, most influential Western writers of the 20th century. He was a modernist writer, author of the famous Ulysses. The only thing I've read by him is The Dubliners, which I loved, and I've been meaning to read more of him ever since.
I've read another 25 pages just now, and I'm going to go upstairs, read some more of this later. I'm really loving it though. The main character, Daedalus, is now kind of a late teenager. Like, it doesn't give ages, but I'm assuming he's about like 15, 16. But Joyce is exploring these very intense feelings of shame that he is experiencing. I don't know, it's got the power of that age of youth where like everything feels so much bigger than it is. Enjoying this more than I thought I would as well. I was expecting it to be like a very challenging read, like a read that was quite difficult to get into, at least in the first instance, but I haven't found that at all. It's so based in thought, and it's so based in kind of like human feeling. It feels, it's not like stream of consciousness, but it almost feels like tapping into the thoughts of a brain, and so it kind of feels quite natural to read, if that makes sense.
No, it did not make sense. All I'm trying to say is that the writing is raw, and I think at least that raw writing which taps into the human experience, is always going to kind of be easy in a way to read because it mimics thought. But the lines of the letters were like fine invisible threads, and it was only by closing his right eye tight, and staring out of the left eye that he could make out the full curves of the capital. I love that final description. A little later, I went out on a walk and I brought this collection of Yeats poetry with me. We sat together at One Summer's End, that beautiful mild woman, your close friend, and you and I, and talked of poetry. I said, a line will take us hours maybe. Yet, if it does not seem a moment's thought, our stitching and unstitching has been naught. I only read like 3 poems because I wanted to memorize one, and then I read some more of Portrait whilst I was eating dinner. I do really like to read whilst I'm eating, and then, of course, to finish the night, I read some more in bed.
So I finished A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce, and it was brilliant. This is about a young man's childhood, right through early childhood to when he is at university, and you just see the massive fluctuations in his character as he grows older. What he wants to do with his life changes so drastically, and I don't want to give spoilers by telling you, but I will say that there is an incident which happens which causes him to feel incredible amounts of guilt and shame, and that kind of shapes the whole of his life thereafter. I think my favourite thing about it was the form and structure, which is not surprising considering that it's James Joyce. And I say that because it's different structurally to anything I've read before, because it kind of on paper sounds like it would be a Bildungsroman novel. The Bildungsroman is a predominantly Victorian narrative style, and
It's where you see the progression of a person right through childhood into adulthood, and you see them kind of growing into the mature, perfect version of themselves. And this is a young man growing into an artist. It is kind of a Bildungsroman novel. However, it's also very much not. But progression in this book is by no means linear, and it kind of ascribes more to Kristeva's woman's time, I think, because you're never really sure where in time we are. When Stephen is talking, there are kind of bits of his childhood which are coming up, they're peeking through the prose, and there isn't like a stable sense of self. His self is so affected by everything which has happened to him already. Like, the voice can change so drastically. It's delirious, and then it's frustrated, and then it's calm, and it all happens so quickly. I think it's a great commentary on identity and how we don't have fixed identity, and those are definitely the questions that came up when I was reading this. It really makes you think about how and why you are the way you are. Now, because I did really enjoy this book, I wanted to read some of the criticism around it to understand it a little bit better. So I read this review from the New York Times, and I really liked what they said about mood and how the book captures space in a very memorable way. And this is so true. Like, the book is very cozy. It's got these lovely moments of like a rainy alleyway or the schoolroom or the home at Christmas time, and I wasn't expecting it to feel so comforting at points. Like, I did end up buying a copy of Portrait because I wanted to return to those really lovely moments. I then read some more serious criticism, like actual academic articles. This one was amazing, the Barry Ryan, that was my favourite. So I read this article, and I read up to page 28, and I'll read the last 10 pages hopefully tomorrow. It's basically tapping into how much we can remember of childhood and whether we can base a sense of identity around remembrances of our childhood, because so much of the book is Stephen looking back on his childhood and criticising his childhood self. It's a very interesting argument so far, and I just want to take it very slowly and read it more deeply. Oh, and also just then I got distracted and read this article on Victorian Oxford and the science of language. I don't know why. Now, I wasn't really sure what I was in the mood for after Portrait, but this looked quite interesting. I'd taken it out of the library. I do love the Penguin Little Black Classic. They give you a shortened version, like the highlights of an author's work, and it's a great way to find a new author and just try somebody new. Oh, I don't know if I like this. It's got such an awful tone. I mean, you can kind of expect it from the title, How to Use Your Enemies. I picked it up more out of interest. Oh, I don't know, it's not even about enemies, it's just about controlling people. This bit says, make people depend on you. An image is made sacred, not by its creator but by its worshipper. I mean, I can kind of get behind this. There's so much to know and life is short. And a life without knowledge is not a life. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is picking up. And then it goes on to say why you should make friends your teachers and you should kind of learn from the people around you. And it says, you'll gain a reputation as an oracle through the sweat of others. Your learned helpers first select the subject and then distill their knowledge and present it to you. If you can't have wisdom as your servant, at least let it be on intimate terms. I will admit that I was almost a little bit disturbed by this as I was reading, and so I wanted to do some research into Balthazar Gracian. I was expecting for him to be a politician or a sophist, but he is not, and this is why context is so important when you're reading books, because he was actually a Jesuit priest, and he was known for being witty and being satirical, and suddenly this book makes so much more sense, because honestly there were precepts in this that I was reading and thinking, this is so ridiculous, how on earth could someone be saying this? The full version of this, with 300 maxims, is called The Pocket Oracle and Art of Prudence, and that was published in 1647. And 1647 was right in the middle of the Franco-Spanish Wars. It was also the year that King Philip declared bankruptcy, and the Spanish Empire was also losing control by 1647, and so it makes sense that it would be a time where politicians would be declaring very loudly that they were powerful and that they were great, and kind of for a book like this to come out at that
time. It feels just deeply satirical of the leaders in Spain. I'm much more excited for the second half, where I'm actually going to be reading it as something satirical as opposed to something serious. And I do wonder actually if that's kind of part of it. So it's kind of sneakier for him to be silently satirical. However, I can imagine there are people watching this who've read it and are going, how on earth could you not tell that that was satire? And to that I say, very fair enough. It's also funny because he's so sure of himself. He's like, you should do this. Like, the idea of making a friend is deeply abstract and there isn't a single answer to it. And yet everything is set out very clearly and like there is a clear answer. And that's kind of hilarious.
The pragmatism of this. Oh my gosh.
I did much prefer the second half of this, where I was actually reading it as it was intended and could pick up on the hilarity of it. There were some lines of sincerity though, especially at the end. Okay, I'm going to dip into this, but not obviously read the whole thing because it's a great anthology. And then I think I'll start this as my next book. This has been on my list for such a long time. I read the 5th one back in 2020, and then this is the last book in the series. But I've been procrastinating reading it because I've just been too excited and I don't want to waste the last time I read it. So yes, I read some of Miss Peregrine, and then I also read this article on Substack, which I loved. It's all about how we need to be more complicated as humans and that we shouldn't simplify ourselves and give ourselves a very strict personal brand. I am back from work. I got back from work about an hour ago. I'm loving Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. In the evening, I read another 2 Substack articles. This is actually my first week reading Substack, but I loved research as a leisure activity. It talks about how when we do research playfully, we can do some of the best academic work, the most niche research, and that research in this capacity is so important. So then here we are on Friday morning, and I was reading some more of Miss Peregrine. This is a fantastic series. If you like things which are slightly like dark, eerie, but also the Victorian Gothic. And I got home feeling really tired today, and so curling up with the book was definitely the correct remedy. I just read another 50 pages of this. That brings me up to page 100. I love this series. Yeah, I finished book 5 years ago in 2020, and I'm only just now reading book 6. And I don't know, I think maybe it's because I don't remember the characters all too well, but I'm finding it really difficult to love this book. And I also wonder if it's partially to do with the other books that I've read directly before this one. I often find that there are books that I read at the wrong time, like in the context of the wrong books. I'm going to put this to one side and not finish this and pick it up maybe in a couple of weeks. I also do often do this, especially with books I know I am likely to enjoy, because I don't want to waste them. Like, you only get to read them for the first time once, and if I'm not loving a book which I was really expecting to love, maybe it's just the wrong time to read it. I'm a firm believer in books having to be read at the right time, and books curing something in a moment, or finding you at the perfect moment, like you read them at the moment that you need them. I need to find this, and I will find it and I'll share it with you, but there's this person who talks about the value of having a library is the fact that it gives you choice, and it kind of gives you this big repository of information that you can dip into when you need it. You know, like the Poetry Pharmacy, which is in Covent Garden, or the book The Novel Cure. I think there is a right time for books. Random musings, but I'm going to choose something else. I have a library book which I'm very keen to read. This is the one I want to read. For as long as we humans have wandered the earth, wild places have required us to build paths to gain access, whether physically or imaginatively. I continued reading Wild in the morning. This is such an interesting book. It's basically split into different types of the wild. So there's the ocean, there's the forest, there's earth, and then it chooses a myth and Amy Jeffs retells it. And she's got this beautiful lyrical voice, so it just reads in such a beautiful way. But then because she is a medievalist and because this is what she did her PhD in, this is what she specialises in, there's an asterisk, and then you actually have an explanation of the myth and how this aspect of the wilderness turns up in medieval mythology. And she teaches you etymology, she teaches you about Middle English. It's so interesting, and it's also quite a quick book as well. As you might be able to tell, I also was travelling to Oxford. I went to see my friend Bella, who is from America. She's a pen pal of mine. The majority of my friends are long distance friends, and it really can be difficult because you want to see them, you want to be able to catch up casually, but you just can't. But it does make seeing them all the more special, all the more wonderful, and you appreciate every moment because you don't know the next time you're going to see them. It had been 2.5 years since I last saw Bella, but I so appreciated seeing her this week, and it was like a little bubble of goodness. We also went to Blackwell's, of course, which is probably my favourite bookshop ever, and this here is the Norrington Room, which is the largest book-selling space in the world, and there are 3 miles of bookshelf space holding 150,000 books, which is incredibly impressive. And then on the way home on the train, I was just reading some more of Wild. My favourite story was from The Forest. I asked Sweeney to sleep 2 trees distant, but even from there he was able to drive away the birds. By the sound of his lilting songs, the branches seemed less tangled, the trees less dark with spite, my mind less soft with rot. It's Saturday evening and I've just got 2 pages left of Wild by Emily Jeffs. I really have loved it, and I love the unique format. Like, the writing is just so different from anything I've come across before. My favourite of the stories is definitely the retelling of Beowulf. I think because it was the one that I was familiar with. I don't know many medieval stories, but that one I knew, and as I was reading it, I was like, wait, this is Grendel, this is Beowulf. I would highly recommend if you like fairy tales, if you like mythology. It's beautifully written. There is plenty to be learned, but I'm going to go to bed after reading the last few pages of this. On Sunday morning, I dipped into Le Petit Tri, which is a newspaper that I get on subscription. I also started reading this play by Euripides. This is wonderful. I've read some Euripides before. I read Iphigenia, the translation by Jane Lumley. I read it once in transcription and then once in manuscript in the British Library. One thing I'm struck by with both Iphigenia and the one I'm reading is how much, I don't know, it kind of almost feels proto-feminist. And with Iphigenia, I thought maybe this was partially because it was a woman doing the translation, because Jane Lumley was the first to translate Euripides into English, it's thought, which is really cool, especially considering that she was a very young woman, basically a girl. But in this too, even though it's a translation by a man, still we've got the nurse being like the hero of this play, and the greatest tragedy is occurring to the nurse, and the nurse has the most strength, she's the moral compass, she kind of embodies wisdom. There's this line actually where she's talking about wisdom and says, after all, wisdom is only happening to guess right. Like, she shows so much humility, but also so much strength and so much wisdom in the fact that she's not trying to have wisdom. It's a lot like that, you know, ancient Greek proverb, the wise man knows he knows nothing. That's very much the nurse. And even though we've got some incredibly misogynistic things being said, the nurse then kind of contradicts that and completely undermines these ideas of women being inferior. It's an excellent play. I would highly recommend it. And I'm about halfway through it at the moment, but I think I'll come back and finish it later. But with the exception of this short article from Psychology Today, I just finished this play in the evening, and that was everything that I read this week. So thank you so much for joining me. I feel like I read some really good books this week, and I feel like I read slightly more than I usually would. The other thing I wanted to include in this video, because this is a bookish week, is my trip to the Cambridge Literary Festival, which I went to the weekend before I filmed this, and so I wanted to show you the segment. I went with my mum and my mum's friend, who I'm very close with, and it was wonderful. Hello, so we are here at Cambridge, in Cambridge, and we're at Holiday Inn, and we are heading into Cambridge to the Old Divinity School because I'm going to be interviewing David Larby, who wrote Frequently Happy. I'm so looking forward to it and also kind of nervous.
You'll be fine. It'll be amazing.
Hopefully, we'll see what happens. But this is the much bookmarked book with my plan of questions tactically put inside.
Cleft without the...
Cambridge is so beautiful.
Lovely, isn't it?
You're just incredible. He is amazing. We all know this. Shaz, uplifting, the most uplifting, beautiful spoken word poetry.
I've always felt like the words themselves are more important than I am, if that makes sense. Words capture me at my best, and I'm not always my best. So when I see a book like this that has tags in it, I'm like, oh wow, that's for real. You're actually gonna come back to this. My biggest thing with creating anything is I feel like the whole point of creation is connection.
We are here in Cambridge for the Literary Festival. What did we see last night, Serena?
Oh, we saw the most wonderful gentleman. I'm just looking for his page. So we saw him at Friday night. There he is, David Larby, and it was just spellbinding. I can't tell you what an absolute gem of a man he is.
But also, tonight, we're going to this. Ground floor galleries.
The statue here is Euripides. But there was no portrait of him done during his life. We don't know if this is actually what he looked like. Tomorrow is tomorrow. Future cares have future cures, and we must focus on today. We are currently walking to Newman's College, which is where Sylvia Plath studied when she was a graduate student here, and it was an all-women's college. So then we went to a talk with Emma Barnett. It was on her new book, Maternity Service, and honestly, this was such a powerful and moving talk. People from the audience were sharing these really emotional stories. People were just getting so emotional. Honestly, I've never been to a talk like this before. It was really moving. We just had dinner and now we are speed walking to Carly Ann Bradley's event, which I'm so excited for. Good morning. So this morning I'm going to be interviewing Katie Kirby, which I'm so excited about. She's got so many young girls into reading and has sold 500,000 books since like the first one, which is kind of incredible. So very excited, and I will see you later, Mum. I'm gonna go to the green room now. Honestly, I loved doing this interview. It was so much fun and there were so many great audience questions from the children. I was so grateful to have been asked and I was really on a high after it as well. Katie Kirby is also just such a lovely human being. Just to finish off the day, we browsed around some different shops, of course Waterstones again, and
Yeah.
what's next on the agenda?
Driving home.
Yes.
A nice hot shower.
I said that I was going to do a library book haul and then invariably forgot, so I'm going to show you. I'm not going to go into loads of depth here. I don't want this video to be longer than it already is. And yes, that's Thunder. Diary of Adrian Mole, the first one, because I actually never read these. What I Was by Meg Rossoff. I've already read this, but it's fantastic and I was really craving a reread. I read it like 10 years ago. This is the sequel to Can You See Me? It's a middle grade book about a girl with autism. Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce, of course, which was the best book I read this week. Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. I picked this up quite haphazardly, like I just saw it and thought it looked good, and I've been told on Instagram that it is good. Wild by Amy Jeffs, which you saw. C.P. Cavafy's Remember Body poems, which he's a Greek poet. I'm excited to have a look. Then I've got the Welsh Fairy book by Jenkin Thomas. It's just a collection of Welsh fairy stories and I actually love Welsh mythology. I think it's my favourite kind of mythology. Finally, I've got that Selected Poems of Yeats, which I still have not finished, even though I've had it out for 2 weeks. Please share as well the books that you borrowed from the library with the tag borrowed this week, because we need to be using our local libraries and I'm so interested to see what you're taking out. So that is my borrowed this week.